Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Cleveland Heights Public Safety and Health Committee for our meeting on December 9th, 2024. It's 5 o'clock. I will call the roll. Vice Chair Larson?
Here.
Member Cobb?
Here.
Myself, here. Today, this is a special meeting regarding the discussion about the Heights Regional Active Transportation Plan put together by our planning department. We have Eric Samt here, and I'm going to yield the floor to him, and you're going to have a presentation for us, and we're looking forward to it.
Well, thank you, members of the committee. We have a short presentation. This will be made available to you. We'll give it to the clerk so it can be posted and everybody can take a look at this. We wanted to give you a brief background of why we're doing this, talk about the process, and then Ken, who's been the project manager, will be here to talk about some of the details of the plan, and then really leave it up open for plenty of questions and answers. So just by way of background, we were working and having conversations with our neighbors in University Heights and South Euclid starting in 2022 about regional connections, connectivity, and we knew that there were all of these funding opportunities out there. So it really started to become an effort of let's do some planning to lead towards implementation. And you're going to hear that a lot tonight. So it started with those three, but then we had other conversations with East Cleveland, the City of Cleveland, Metro Parks, and the county, and the City of Euclid. Because ultimately, when you're on a bike, when you're walking, when you're driving, the borders don't really mean that much to you. So we want to make sure that that can be a seamless transition, and ultimately trying to get to our parks, to maybe to the lake, and things like that. In 2022, we applied for a NOACA TLCI grant, which is a Transportation for Livable Communities initiative with the three cities. And we saw that as like a model, a template for how three cities can work together. And around that same time, ODOT opened up their Active Transportation Planning Assistance Grant program. And the federal government opened up their Safe Streets for All and Roadways for All SS4A program. So a lot of these things started popping just at the time that we were starting to work together. Just want to talk briefly here about what their grant program was about. And essentially, as it says here on the screen, it's funding to support local governments in creating this standalone active transportation plan that aligned with the statewide Walk, Bike, Ohio. And that plan has 6 focus areas, which you can see on the screen. Connectivity, we were talking about that. Safety, that's always top of mind. Equity is very, very important. Network utilization, making sure people are using that. Livability and preservation. While this assistance could only be used for planning and not implementation, the idea from ODOT was if you do our plan, that will set you up for future funding opportunities. And so that's what we're intending to do. So we applied, and we applied with the 3 cities together, which initially ODOT came to us and they said, how is this possibly going to work? How are you going to, 3 cities, 3 different places? And we'll talk a little bit about why we think it was going to work and how it actually really worked well. It is complementary but separate from the Streets for All project, and we can talk about that later in this meeting if we have time. We decided that Cleveland Heights was going to be the right team to lead this. We had the biggest staff. We have Ken on board, and it was going to be mostly in our city anyway. Shared resources. So this is one of the reasons why we thought it was a good idea. And let me paint a picture. So if one community, if South Euclid were to just apply for this, they've got one planner who can lead an effort. And if that one planner is sick that day, then what happens? Well, in this case, we had each of the cities, staff able to be available, each of the libraries, each of the support staffs available. So we really thought that was a great idea. ODOT supplies the consultant, no cost to the city. And again, setting up for future ODOT funding. The consultants for this are a team of Burton Planning Services, Burgess and Nipple,
Yes.
And Tool Design. So these are 3 of the sort of top transportation planners in the state. And we were also successful in the SS4A grant, which again, similar line of thinking, do the plan, that sets you up for future funding. I'll throw this slide over to Ken to talk about what is an active transportation plan.
Yeah, so really what is an active transportation plan? It's really looking at making travel safe for any human-powered mode of transportation. So walking, biking, rolling, which includes skateboards, scooters, wheelchairs, anything like that. Really anything that you're not getting by within a car. The plan includes visions, goals, strategies to support those efforts between the three cities. And this plan really focuses on connectivity and building out the network over safety as the number one priority. Safety is certainly built into everything, but making sure that that connection and that network exists going forward is really kind of the key to this plan over, say, the Safe Streets for All plan, which is more safety focused. So I'm going to read you the vision. This was put together from staff from the three cities as well as the steering committee. I think it encapsulates kind of everything that we're looking to do. It's the Heights Regional Active Transportation Plan will provide a framework to increase transportation equity and allow residents to safely travel in and between Cleveland Heights, University Heights, and South Euclid. The plan strives to create a safe, convenient, and accessible transportation system for those walking, biking, and rolling regardless of wealth, ability, or disability. Like Eric said, we started this project at the end of, kind of the tail end of 2023, so we're about 16 months in and we're finally wrapping up. There's been a number of steering committee meetings, and a lot of those is kind of reviewing existing documents, past plans, existing conditions analysis, as well as reviewing the project list and the action plans. And then kind of once those were kind of developed and we had the core idea of the plan and the projects we are looking at, then we opened it up to public engagement to get their feedback and see if there's any places that we might have missed between city staff and those and that steering committee. So right now we're kind of at that final draft of the report for you guys to review, and the other cities are doing the same thing with the hope that we adopt it by the end of the month. Talking a little bit again, we started to go through that community engagement part. We had one open house, which had about 50 to 60 people attended. And again, that was towards the tail end. We purposely did that to make sure that we had kind of everything in place. Given that it is a three-city effort, it's kind of hard to get three different cities to get that many public meetings. So to just doing one stop to do that, we thought was key. But on top of that, we did have online surveys. We had almost 600 people engage with that survey and in person. So there was quite a bit of response in those surveys, and I was handing out links at a lot of different events, different pop-up events, like community bike rides, to try to get some engagement there. And really the highlights from those meetings and from those surveys is kind of threefold. Better maintenance of the current infrastructure was one of the big takeaways. We also, people wanted more separation, whether it's on a bike lane or on a sidewalk that might be right up against the road. People just obviously feel unsafe being close to cars, especially on faster corridors. And the popular corridors for improvements were Cedar Road, Lee Road, and Mayfield Road. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean,
No, go ahead.
so Warrensville, I mean, I'm not questioning the results. I guess what I'm about to ask, to be more clear, these corridors seem more centric to Cleveland Heights. You know,
Yeah, those are the three that ended up having the most feedback. We'll talk a little bit further about the prioritization of the projects and how that folds in with the community input. But these were the ones that kept rising to the top again and again.
And that's across all three cities.
That's across all three cities.
Perfect. Thank you.
So the plan includes, I'm sure you guys have at least take a look at it. It includes that executive summary, the vision and goals, kind of a longer discussion of the community engagement. There's a deep dive into the existing conditions, and those proposed projects and programs, how those scoring methods were developed, and then how those priority projects, so those ones that are a little more important or ranked a little higher, how those were picked, and then how we go about building these things out in the future. There's about 150 total projects inside the plan between the three cities. That includes 21 miles of bike boulevards, 17 miles of shared use paths, 11 miles of separated bike lanes, 5 miles of buffered bike lanes, 3 miles of on-road bike lanes, 6 miles of new sidewalks where there's some gaps, and improvements to about 50 intersections. And there's also about 75 policy recommendations. Some of those are just updates to current policies, and that is spread across 3 cities. So if you're talking about, say, a Vision Zero, it might be count as 1 for all 3 cities, or 1 for each city. So that number may seem a little inflated, but that's going to include things like looking at banning ride on red at stoplights, relooking the helmet laws that are currently exist in the city, looking at slip lanes and how we deal with those sort of policy things that we'd be looking for city council to help us implement. This is just a quick, I know the maps might be a little hard to read here, I know it's in the plan, of just how spread out those 150 projects are. They're not located in one spot. We've really focused on trying to hit just about everywhere and finding every gap and every need and everywhere there's demand within the 3 cities. So these are kind of the priority projects, so not just public input, but it also uses ODOT's demand and need tools. And these are kind of the projects for Cleveland Heights that are going to be prioritized. So again, Warrensville, Center Road, and Noble Road. I think that ends up being number 1 on the list between all the scores. So not just with public input, but everything need and demand. And Cedar Road, those are suggested to have separated bike lanes for those. If you're looking at buffered bike lanes, that's Taylor Road. Again, we're trying to address that right now with the TLCI, so hopefully that'll be taken care of in due time. Shared use paths on Mayfield, Monticello, and Euclid Heights Boulevard. Bicycle boulevards, we're looking to improve and build upon that future greenways projects. That's what Silsbee, Essex, Westminster, and Clarkson, those were all part of that. So we're looking to add other speed calming elements to those to help make them a little more accessible to bikes. And that would include Compton Road, which we know with the Compton Road Greenway, the improvements that are coming soon there. And Bluestone Road was a pretty key connector as well. And then there's a number of sidewalk gaps. We're fortunately pretty complete with sidewalks, but there are a number of gaps like on North Park, East Derbyshire. There's some gaps on Belvoir and a few other small ones throughout the city, and all those are called out in the plan as well. So the fun part is, how do we actually go about getting this stuff built? This is what it could look like. We would obviously need to get these projects designed, go after funding. So there's a number of funding sources we'll talk about shortly. Then we got to get them built. We got to have a plan to maintain them, and then a plan to evaluate how successful those implementations are. So again, looking at Burton has helped us look at a number of different sources through ODOT, as well as we have federal sources to start going after monies, to start getting this stuff to help lessen that burden on the city itself. So there's things like the ODOT pedestrian on bicycle special solicitation, which we are looking to probably try to fund the Noble Road portion of the Warrensville Noble through that. There's a $3 million limit on that project, so we can do the whole thing like we would hope to, but if we break it into phases, maybe there's a chance we can use that program to fund that, or maybe it's something else. Of course, we'll always look to NOACA, TLCI to fund projects, and some of the federal grants that are out there. So what's the next steps? Of course, you guys and council are reviewing the project or the plan now. And we're hoping for all three cities to adopt by the end of the month. I know we all have meetings on the 16th. I know ourselves and University Heights have had a first reading. South Euclid is expected to do a one and done reading. We'll see how that goes. Of course, we're only hopeful, and we'll take any feedback that you have regarding the plan as well. There were cut sheets which included Warrensville and Noble, which also had a cost estimate with that, as well as design. Bluestone Road, which there's a little bit of a picture in the top right of what that intersection at Green Road could look like. Not too different, but a little bit different with that curb bump out. It's a little hard to see in this, but some lighting and some other little minor changes there, as well as the rest of the improvements that would be on Bluestone. So at this point, I'll open it up to any questions that you have.
Any questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
I'll ask a couple and then somebody else can. First of all, I'm so impressed. Such a comprehensive report and all the work, the time that's gone into this over 18 months is just phenomenal. So I did want to note that, like, when we're looking at this report on page 10, the vision and the goals, connectivity, safety, accessibility, health, education, equity, they describe the concerns council hears often from citizens. So it really is a great way to start out this document. And then on page 19, or page 12, the analysis revealed high concentration of bike and pedestrian crashes from 2018 and 2022 on the major arterials. And again, these arterials are often a point of concern for our citizens. So you're addressing that. On page 19, the top barriers to walking. My thing, I guess you want to call it, unmaintained sidewalks and trails. And I do know you talk about maintenance later on, so I'll bring that up again, but we've got to be more roller friendly. We have to be. However, the city accomplishes that. And we do have ARPA funding for people that have sidewalks to repair they can't afford to. So we've got beginnings, but any of those kinds of funds that we could get to help people get their sighted sidewalks done would be very nice. Somebody else's turn.
I guess this is more of a comment. Whatever we can do, we have to do it. Don't want to sound like a David Downer, but this report has got more than a dozen prior reports that have many recommendations. And some of these date back to the early 2000s. Again, as you know, I'm going to vote to adopt this, but what can we offer the residents in terms of assurances that we're actually going to do something with this plan?
You know, that's something we heard again and again. So that's not a new comment. That's something we heard at every public meeting with this and Safe Streets for All. I think one thing we've really focused and relied on our consultants as well as our grant writing team is they'll be able to look for, if we're going to suggest a project, where's that funding source coming from, or where are those funding sources to actually do this? So we know the city doesn't have the money on hand to just go and build all this, tomorrow, as much as we might like that.
And I wanted to add, this is where I think the state and the federal government are in complete alignment. I think they've recognized with transportation that places do things differently, and often they do it in different time periods. And what they've asked for, what ODOT here specifically said, and what the federal government said is, do our plan the way that we want you to do it. You may have already studied this, but if you can put it together in the way that we're used to, then we can more easily fund you, essentially, is the way it is. So I think part of that is on their end, but certainly on our end and your end now, this is hopefully a one-stop or a two-stop shop with the SS4A to say, these are our guiding documents now going forward for the next 5 or 10 years, 20 years to fund these transportation things.
And just one other question. Was there some reason why Shaker wasn't involved in this?
They were a part of that sort of secondary group that we spoke to. And I think they were happy being part of that conversation. They have their own transportation planning going on. But it was really the three of us, I think, that we said, let's keep this manageable, because if we start bringing in 5 communities, that might become untenable.
I think that's reasonable. I mean, I think the more cooks spoil the broth, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's really handy to, kind of focus on close, more similar groups or similar groups that sort of where you are in your transportation planning. And I personally think the groups that you picked are right. I kind of want to go back to what, Craig was talking about, and that's really the implementation and when we will see these things. What's difficult for a community member that may be watching is you see a really amazing report. I mean, you guys really have done very well. And you see this and it almost appears that, we are doing these things. And it's like, no, you're setting yourself up because the funding agencies want to see that you've got a comprehensive plan before they fund a little piece of that. But I would tell you that, and again, I'm new to this whole city budgeting process and how all this stuff works. But it seems to me that there needs to be, I'm going to pull a number out of thin air, completely made up, 12 projects that we know that can be bid off. And I know everybody wants to get grant money for things, but pick some of the things that maybe are sort of not grant funding popular,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense, just to sort of get done. And you've helped yourself in this process to kind of come up with a bunch of priorities. As a council member, during our budgeting process, I'd feel really, really good about getting a good presentation and say, we need a special ask of $2 million, again, just pulling numbers out of thin air, that can be used for some transformational projects that will do X, Y, and Z. I would love to be able to see and hear that because we fund so much, and sometimes it's just sort of keeping our head above water. It's not actually going beyond that. So I would encourage in budgeting processes that we kind of go through and see these things. I have a couple specific questions, and it kind of comes down to the amplification of certain voices that an individual council member hears. So the two hot areas I hear about are sidewalks in Warrensville in order to get to the target, and I hear about the road safety. And and just because there's been, I think, fatalities on both of those streets, those are the things that I hear a lot. And I know this is a far more comprehensive process in coming up with priorities. But these are the things I hear. And maybe it's the person yelling the most, and sometimes you don't want to listen to the person that bangs their fist on the. You don't want to listen to the loudest voice. Okay, you need to listen to all the right voices. But that's what I hear. As a part of this, is there anything that you need from us? I mean, besides advocating for the passage of this, which I'm very much for, and I think we're all nodding our heads. I think we're going to ask our council members to pass this. But is there anything that we could help to get things shovel ready that you can do? I mean, our budget processing is still kind of in the. I mean, we've been told there's no capital budget. We need to rethink that. I don't have no idea how that's going to look, in all honesty. And maybe this is a question that can't be asked right now or answered right now. But what can we do as a council to support this work that you're doing? Get things that are shovel ready, possibly, or do some consulting. Bring a consultant in to do X, Y, and Z. So get to the little step to get you a much bigger bag of money. So I don't know if you have anything to share now, but I mean, if you do, I'd love to hear it, but otherwise, I think council would be we'd welcome that. So,
Well, I'll just react to your previous question and then this last one,
Yeah.
which is, yeah, certainly there is, I think we would love to be able to make a pitch to you in the budget, whenever the budget is, for monies to go towards some of these projects. And I think the searching for grant funding is usually good to fill a gap, or maybe to fill a gap on a larger project, but there are smaller projects here that I think we could pull out that would be more reasonable for us, for the city to fund. So we can put our head together and come up with that list of whatever number it is, and at least present it to you so you have that information in your deliberations. And then this is not really an answer to what you were saying before, but I do think that sometimes what happens when we are spending public money on something, there can be loud voices that are in opposition to it. And I think in this particular case, since this is such a comprehensive plan and it's a commitment to safety, that even if those folks show up to a meeting and say, don't spend money on this, put it somewhere else, that's obviously where council needs to come in and say, no, this is really important to us, putting a sidewalk on Lawrenceville, for example, because that will reduce fatalities and safety concerns. So I think that's where the elected official has the ability to help tamper down some of the concerns that the public may have, because they usually come to you with those concerns.
so I know we have limited time, and there was some offer to give us a little update on the Safe Streets for All. Are we all okay with?
No, I have a few more questions.
So let's go for that.
On page 36, there, it mentions the checklist that's part of, say, Complete and Green Streets plan, and it includes a series of descriptive yes, no questions regarding existing infrastructure and proposed project to identify what's been included in previous plans and inadequate existing infrastructure. It sounds to me like that would be, we talked about all the different programs that are out there and plans and recommendations that we have. It sounds like that checklist can be useful. We've been talking about it in the Transportation and Mobility Committee. And so are you using it? Is it being utilized, that checklist?
The checklist exists. There have been conversations with
Right.
Public Works, but I don't think that it has been utilized as it was intended to. And I know the mayor has spoken about really revisiting that. Just so everyone knows, that checklist was helped develop by a former member of the TAC, Gail Lewin, based upon what they had in Cleveland and other places. So there's some good precedent there, and it just needs to, I think, be revived as a target to utilize.
I think that would be, it's timely because when I talked to Director Klingscale about, are you incorporating Complete and Green Streets into your projects? She said, yes, they're doing that with planning and development. So I'm very happy to hear that that's kind of on the table and in consideration. RTA, I saw that they had a member on the steering, or on the first committee, the program policy committee, whatever. Did they take an active part in listening to what you were hearing from people, that we really need a buffed up, much more hardy bus routes and more often and those kinds of things? Were they available to listen to that?
Yes, I think RTA, we didn't talk so much about the frequency. We talked a lot about locations.
Yes.
And if those need moved, that they're open to those possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at those ones on Warrensville Center Road,
Right.
if they need moved around. So they're open to things like that. Who knows with their staff limitations, if the frequency can improve. I
Yeah.
think we'd all like to see that. We did meet with the drivers themselves, the drivers that drive in Cleveland Heights, to kind of hear some of their concerns. And I guess we're kind of lucky is that they actually said there weren't a lot of concerns in Cleveland Heights compared to other cities. That's mostly due to not a lot of turns on their routes. So there's not a lot of points of conflict for them compared to other communities. So that's some good feedback from them. Anything else there?
No, and I think I've seen RTA in the couple of years I've been here become more engaged. And I don't know if that's a change in philosophy or a different staff, but I do think they are becoming their ears to the ground much more than it has been in the past. And they certainly, I think, are open to conversations where we can prove that there's a ridership need.
Yeah.
For example, when we have new development coming in, like that's good for them. But if we can say like, hey, this route is a place where there's a lot of people who want to have service that's just not there right now.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be open to having that conversation, whether that results in a new stop or more frequent service.
Even if they'd revisit some of the routes they stopped, like the one on Taylor Road that went away.
Yeah.
I mean, those people are left without a
Absolutely.
bus up to Severance, and it really concerns me. Streetlight, that software you were using, do you consider that fairly adequate for accuracy?
So streetlight data, which is what the consultants were using, that measured pedestrian and cycling activity. We're starting to see less of a use for that. They've really stopped focusing on the data after 2019. There's been a little bit of legal hiccups. So I don't know if they'll get those sorted out and if that data will be better going forward or not. Just should people, what access to that data should companies and the people that contract with those companies, including the consultants. So that might not be a good source going forward. We do have Urban SDK, the Public Works has purchased, and that helps monitor and look at speeding data and traffic volume across the city. And that has been really helpful. They've been really good to work with. So while that doesn't help with the pedestrian and bike counts, it does help us see what speed changes exist after we implement something like the speed tables on Harcourt and South Taylor and other things like that. We can get pretty quick feedback on those projects.
And I'll just add that ODOT has had conversations about if they're going to be funding a project, they have software encounters for pedestrian bikes that they feel they should throw into the package, because if they're going to be funding this type of improvement, give the municipality the ability to actually measure its success. So that's a possibility should we go after the
And then we talk about baselines and data driven all the time, and you, with your GIS work, you work with data. Do you feel, does the project team feel that the 600 plus folks that responded, whether at meetings or in the surveys, represent the diversity of Cleveland Heights?
Probably not as much as we would like.
Okay.
We tried, we focused the meeting at the Noble Library to try to draw some of the residents from that side of town which don't normally attend. We handed out flyers and that. And we did see a number of residents come out. Probably not as diverse as we want. It was also even between the three cities, it was very much Cleveland Heights focused in the responses and attendance that we had. Not that there wasn't response from the other ones, but it was weighted a little more towards Cleveland Heights. But again, there's the data-driven portion of that too that I think answers a lot of those questions that we may not get from just the public feedback.
And I'll be honest, I think the number is disappointing, particularly in a place like Cleveland Heights, but not surprising.
Right.
But I do think SS4A, which we'll talk a little bit hopefully in a minute, but then down the road, there were some techniques that were utilized there that got us some better representation that I think would be valuable for us to learn.
I just have one more quick question. At some point, when I was speaking to the Heights Bike Coalition, they were talking about connectivity, and they were talking about, rather than putting the bike infrastructure on the main arterials, putting it on parallel side streets. Did that get talked about during your planning and your reporting?
Yeah, and if you look, a lot of the bike boulevard things are for those parallel, like lower volume, lower speed streets.
Okay.
We know that there's also a lot of people that want to ride on the main streets for a number of different reasons. It's often the shortest route.
Right.
People actually want to be seen. They don't want to be on a side street where they may feel less safe, not having as many people around. So if you can build a facility that is safe for them, like a separated bike lane or a shared use path that's off the street, it can kind of solve both of those issues of being a safe route and a quicker route for folks.
Thank you.
All set. I have a follow-up question regarding the urban SPA.
SDK.
SDK. Software development. And you used Hardcourt as an example on the speed table there. There's also a loaner speed table that was put on Taylor Road too. Correct. Can we look at what that data is like?
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm asking is that there's a lot of residents that come to us that want a speed table. And the mayor has echoed his comments about a lot of those people that come in, they don't really understand the whole holistic data. They think they've got a problem, but they really don't. So you have to really pick and choose your battles as to where some of these things go. I'd like to see the accuracy of that. And the reason I'm suggesting is I live on Demington. Actually, on Demington, the mayor lives down the street. Between our two houses is one of those speed radar systems that's strapped to a pole. It's been there for 6 months and it's been dead. But everybody drives by and sees that, and there's a lot of criticism on even why that's there, and is it collecting data, is it not collecting data? I would like to be able to say, hey, look, maybe we're not using those, we're using this software now, so there's a good reason why it's sitting there. But I don't have anything to really say.
So I'll speak a little bit. I can get you the data from South Taylor and Harcourt. I know I've sent the mayor a report on both of those streets. We saw about a 6 mile an hour reduction in speed.
Wow, okay.
So that's
good.
pretty significant. So it's been successful.
Okay.
And I just lost my train of thought on the other.
The camera, or not the camera, but the thing on the pole. Maybe that's
For the Urban SDK, there's going to be some reporting software that's coming out of that very soon. And so the idea of that is it's going to create automated reports every month that'll give, say, the top 10 speeding streets. And that's something we've been talking about, wanting to get off to the mayor's office and to council once those reports are automatically generated. Because right now we have to kind of go in manually and find those streets, but all that's supposed to come out first quarter of next year. So hopefully a lot of that data can start to come to you guys in a much more manageable, quick manner. So we're really looking forward to that piece of
So
software.
this software lives in Public Works. Is there any, do you need a license? Is there, again, what can council do to help you? So if there's something we can do, if the license, I don't know how it all works, maybe it doesn't make any sense, but please make sure that when you need something, it's getting included. We have a little bit of time, I hope, to talk about the Safe Streets for All.
We have just 2 slides on that also.
Beautiful, that's great.
So just by way of background, this is part of their SS4A program, which intentionally said do a plan, do demonstration and implementation. That's what we're seeing throughout the state and throughout the country is following that model. Our initial grant was $200,000 in 2022, but we didn't really get the money until 2023 to do what we're calling the Comprehensive and Equitable Safety Action Plan. Focus on fatalities and serious injuries. In this case, we had to hire somebody, so we did an RFP process. We hired Kimley Horn to lead the project. So all of that money was going towards their leadership of that project. We anticipate getting a draft in the next week or so, which then we'll review, and then similar to the active transportation plan, we'll get out there for public comment. We hope to bring this back to you in January or February. Same type of meeting, same type of presentation with hopeful adoption. But in the meantime, we applied for and received the demonstration grant, which we'll talk about in a second, and we still intend on applying for implementation funding whenever that comes out. Last year it was May, so we expect that again. Just if you are concerned about how the next administration may approach this, everything we've heard is that this program was going to expire in 2026 anyway. So the sooner we can get our applications in, the better. And it seems like the May 25 timeframe is not going to be fooled with, because there would have to be too much that would happen on the federal level for them to eliminate that. So what did we apply for and what did we get? So it's an $800,000 grant that we received. We have to put in a 20% match, which is our $200,000 local match. We've proposed that in our capital, the planning capital, as traffic calming. I know there's other traffic calming money in being proposed, but we wanted to make sure that at least somewhere in that capital budget was this $200K. And I'll pass it to Ken in a second to talk about the grant elements, but just so everybody understands, this is the federal government. It takes a long time to get the MOU signed with them. It's more like three to 6 months. So even though we got awarded this in 2024, it's a 2025 project. I wouldn't worry about it at all as a 2024 budget expense. Nothing's going to happen until sometime next year. So Ken, walk them through what we applied for.
Yeah, so we're looking at a kind of a series of projects spread throughout the city. So we're looking to do some temporary road diets. Part of that'll be along Noble Road, Monticello, a section of Mayfield, and South Taylor, I believe, was the fourth one. So just paint and plastic. We'll put it up. We'll reduce the lanes, kind of make it how we want it to look. And again, we have that urban SDK as well as the ODOT crash data. We'll be able to monitor the success of what's going on with those. There's a lot of looking at daylighting crosswalks, which we know is hugely important. You can do that pretty cheaply with paint and plastic.
Are you looking
other-
at that on Coventry? I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you look at the map, I know it's a little hard to see, but yes, Coventry is included. There's a few different projects on Coventry. Signal modifications, those are looking at like lead pedestrian intervals. So while that may sound like something that's temporary, but the idea is if we can go ahead and get those done so that we give pedestrians a head start. So instead of, the light turning green and then the little person comes up, we give them like a 10-second head start or whatever the street calls for, to give them a heads up. And that would include probably looking at banning right turn on red at a number, if not all locations. Again, the ATP calls for banning right on red at all locations. We know that's an effective, safe idea. And then a number of different traffic calming ideas. So that could be chicanes, temporary speed tables, anything like that we can go after. And those are the roads that are highlighted in yellow. And again, those are kind of spread out. We looked a little bit of that urban SDK where we know we have some speeding and where we had some data that a consultant gave us as well.
And we want the steering committee of the TAC to be involved in this. They've been really good about providing input, representing the community, but also they're saying, we don't want to just be part of a plan and then, walk away from it. So we think this is a great example of a case where you can have residents and stakeholders, and they can be the people that can bug us and bug you. Hey, why aren't you funding these things more? And ultimately what comes out of the demonstration grant is an updated version of the CSAP. So while these are going to be standalone documents, they're also living, breathing documents that we hope to, as we get continually updated. And again, we hope to come back to you in January to give you a more detailed presentation about the CSAP itself. But we thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. Any other questions? Well, I'd like to say thank you again. You guys do wonderful work. It's great to see it. It's great that our community sees it. I mean, it's one of those things where you look at this real proud to be part of this. So thank you very much.
Do you want or need a motion that we make a recommendation that all of council approve this resolution? Do we need that?
Yes.
Well, I would make a motion that we recommend that all of council adopt resolution number 235-2024.
Happy to second it.
Any discussion?
We've had it.
Call the roll. Gail,
Aye.
Craig,
Aye.
and I. Okay, thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.